Adolf Hitler is terrified of 4 men. In 1 year, these commandos will destroy over 400 Axis aircraft and force the Führer to issue a secret execution order, eliminate them on sight, even if they surrender. This is the story of the Special Air Service, a unit so effective at asymmetric warfare that the Führer personally ordered their execution, regardless of whether they wore uniforms or attempted to surrender. But what makes a small band of irregular soldiers so dangerous that the most powerful dictator in Europe loses sleep over them? And how did Hitler's obsession reveal the fatal weakness at the heart of his entire war machine? To understand Hitler's paranoia, you have to rewind to the spring of 1941, when Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps exploded across Libya like a sandstorm. The Germans arrive with a doctrine built for European forests and plains, carrying almost no intelligence on desert operations. Rommel's aggressive push toward the Egyptian border creates a logistical nightmare that stretches supply lines an additional 700 miles through scorching wasteland. The port of Tripoli can handle only 45,000 tons of supplies per month, but Rommel's 7 divisions need 70,000 tons just to survive. Fuel, ammunition, water, food, everything has to travel hundreds of miles on roads that barely exist, through heat that melts rubber tires and boils engine coolant. The smell of overheating radiators mixes with the stench of brackish well water crawling with worms. Victory in the desert belongs not to the side with the best tanks, but to whoever can keep those tanks running. Inside this exhausting war of logistics, a young British officer named David Stirling lies in an Alexandria hospital bed, his back shattered from a botched parachute jump. He is 25 years old, a second lieutenant in the Scots Guards. Stirling stares at the ceiling, morphine dulling the fire in his spine, but not the fury in his mind. The British have been throwing hundreds of commandos at single targets, hundreds of men, dozens of vehicles, weeks of planning, and for what? A handful of destroyed aircraft? Maybe. The equation is broken. Too big, too slow, too loud. But what if you flipped it? What if 4 men could do what 400 cannot? Small teams could slip past enemy defenses, plant bombs on parked aircraft, and disappear before anyone knew they were there. 4 men with explosives could destroy more planes in one night than an entire squadron of bombers. It is a radical idea, and Stirling knows middle-ranking officers will dismiss it as fantasy. But what Stirling doesn't know is that his idea will terrify the most powerful man in Europe. So, he does something insane. Still on crutches, Stirling scales the perimeter fence of British General Headquarters in Cairo, hobbling past sentries who assume anyone climbing a fence must have authorization. He limps through the corridors until he finds General Claude Auchinleck's office. Auchinleck is under crushing pressure from Winston Churchill to launch an offensive. Stirling hands him a 1-page memo. Auchinleck reads it. Then he authorized the creation of L Detachment, Special Air Service Brigade, in July 1941. The name is pure deception, designed to make German intelligence believe an entire airborne brigade is operating in North Africa. In reality, Stirling has 60 men, but Hitler views North Africa as a political sideshow, a favor to keep Mussolini's Italy aligned with the Axis. The Führer's real obsession is the invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, which launches just 1 month before Stirling's unit is born. Hitler believes the Desert War will be decided by traditional tank battles and frontline infantry clashes. He has no idea that a handful of men in armed jeeps are about to turn his campaign into a logistics catastrophe. The SAS's first mission was a disaster. On November 16th, 1941, Stirling dropped his men by parachute near Gazala airfield during a violent sandstorm. High winds scatter the paratroopers across miles of desert. Some break bones on landing. Others are separated from their equipment. The mission is aborted, and Sterling limps back to base, humiliated. But instead of giving up, he pivots. If airborne insertion is too risky, then they will drive. Sterling partners with the Long-Range Desert Group, expert desert navigators who use modified trucks to traverse hundreds of miles of uncharted sand. The LRDG drops the SAS teams near their targets, then returns days later to extract them. It is crude, but it works. Over the next 6 months, the SAS begins a systematic campaign of destruction. They infiltrate Axis airfields at night, placing small explosive charges on parked Luftwaffe aircraft. The charges are ingeniously simple, a mixture of plastic explosive, thermite, and a time delay fuse developed by an SAS officer named Jock Lewis. A single man can carry enough Lewis bombs to destroy a dozen planes. The Germans have no defense against this, and Hitler is about to find out. Pilots and ground crew wake to find their aircraft burning, fuel dumps exploding, ammunition stores detonating. No one sees the attackers. No one hears them approach. They are ghosts. By mid-1942, the SAS had destroyed over 400 Axis aircraft on the ground, more than the entire Royal Air Force had shot down in air-to-air combat over the same period. Rommel begins calling Sterling the Phantom Major, and the Gestapo places a bounty of 100,000 Reichsmarks on his head. But Hitler isn't satisfied with money. He wants something far more final, and in Berlin, he is already drafting an order that will turn the SAS from soldiers into hunted animals. Hitler receives these reports with mounting rage. He cannot comprehend how a few dozen men in jeeps can achieve strategic effects that negate the power of entire armored divisions. The Führer's worldview is built on the superiority of massed force, on the crushing weight of tanks and artillery and disciplined infantry. But the SAS is proving that a small, intelligent team can sever the logistical arteries that keep his armies alive. This is asymmetric warfare at its most effective, and it terrifies him. What makes it worse is that Grand Admiral Erich Raeder has been arguing that the Mediterranean is the key to victory. If Germany can hold North Africa, they can strike at British oil supplies in the Middle East and threaten the Soviet Union from the south. But Raeder's strategy requires secure supply lines, and the SAS is shredding them. If you want to see more stories of how small groups of determined soldiers change the course of history, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Now, let's talk about what made the SAS so effective and why Hitler became personally obsessed with annihilating them. The SAS is forged at Achnacarry Castle in Scotland. The originals, 60 volunteers from a disbanded commando unit called Lay Force, are thrown into freezing Loch Fyne at 3 in the morning with full packs. They speed march 30 miles with live ammunition cracking over their heads. They sleep 4 hours a night. They are taught one rule: do the sensible, obvious thing without waiting for orders. This is heresy in the German military, where soldiers obey without question. But the SAS doesn't want obedient soldiers. They want thinkers who can survive alone behind enemy lines. This decentralized autonomy allows them to operate in what the Germans call a gray zone of military law, where traditional rules of engagement no longer apply. These men are about to prove that discipline without thought is useless against chaos with purpose. Hitler's paranoia deepens when he learns about Jock Lewis, the man who invented the bomb destroying his air force. Lewis had visited Berlin in the 1930s, attended Nazi rallies, and praised German toughness in private letters. But Kristallnacht in 1938 changed everything. Louis watched Nazi thugs rampage through Jewish neighborhoods, burning synagogues and smashing windows. He returned to Britain disgusted. Now, the discipline he once admired in Hitler Youth, he is using to train British commandos to dismantle the Reich from within. Louis's betrayal haunts Hitler personally. To the Führer, this is treason of the highest order. The SAS represents everything Hitler hates, a synthesis of British aristocratic authority and what he calls underhanded criminal tactics. He sees them as gentlemen bandits who wear uniforms but fight without honor, who use the rules of war as camouflage and then discard them when convenient. What makes it worse is that the SAS is a meritocracy. Selection prioritizes individual initiative and technical skill, not racial purity or political loyalty. Hitler's SS is a massive organization, over 1 million members at its peak, chosen for their Aryan ancestry. The SAS never numbers more than 2,000 men, chosen because they are smart, tough, and capable. Hitler finds it incomprehensible that such a small force can achieve strategic results his racially pure elites cannot match. By 1943, the SAS had expanded to include French paratroopers, Greek commandos, and even anti-fascist Germans. They operate as a mob for jobs, wearing whatever uniforms they want, driving customized vehicles, bristling with machine weapons, and raising general hell in the Axis rear. Their contempt for standard military discipline is a direct strike against the Nazi ethos of total order. Hitler begins to suspect that this SAS is a personal hit squad, controlled directly by Churchill to assassinate high-ranking Nazi officials. This SAS philosophy, which they call relative superiority, argues that a small force with speed and clear purpose can overcome a larger, slower enemy, even one dug into defensive positions. But what really pushes Hitler over the edge is a series of British commando raids on occupied France and the Channel Islands in 1942. Reports reach Berlin that German prisoners have been eliminated while their hands were tied. He becomes convinced that the SAS and similar units are composed of criminals and former convicts, released from prison specifically to eliminate German soldiers in cold blood. The idea is absurd, but Hitler's worldview leaves no room for nuance. To him, commandos are not soldiers, they are terrorists, and terrorists do not deserve the protections of the Geneva Convention. On October 18th, 1942, after exhaustive deliberation with High Command lawyers, Hitler personally writes a secret directive that will change the war. It is called the Commando Befehl, the Commando Order. The directive is explicit. Any enemy soldier captured during a commando operation, regardless of whether they are in uniform, regardless of whether they attempt to surrender, is to be handed over to the Sicherheitsdienst for immediate execution. No pardon is to be given under any circumstances. The order is a flagrant violation of the 1907 Hague Convention and the 1929 Geneva Convention, both of which Germany has ratified. But Hitler no longer cares about international law. Within weeks, the order will reach field commanders across Europe, and in France, 31 SAS men are about to discover that surrender is no longer an option. The peak of SAS operations in the desert came on the night of July 26, 1942, during a raid on Sidi Hanesh airfield in Libya. Sterling plans to storm the base in vehicles, a departure from the unit's usual stealthy infiltration tactics. 18 jeeps navigate 50 miles of pitch-dark desert in tight formation, driving without headlights under a full moon. Each jeep mounts 4 Vickers K machine weapons that can spit out over 1,200 rounds per minute. As the convoy approaches, the Germans switch on the runway lights to guide a landing bomber. The lights illuminate the target perfectly. Sterling fires a green flare. The jeeps roar onto the airfield in a V formation, machine weapons blazing. Tracers rip through parked Junkers, Ju-87 Stukas, and Ju-52 transports, shredding fuel tanks and detonating ammunition. The night erupts into chaos, the smell of burning aviation fuel mixing with the sharp crack of exploding ordnance. In 15 minutes, the raiders destroy 37 Luftwaffe aircraft. German retaliatory fire is wild and uncoordinated, taking down only one SAS soldier, John Robson, before the convoy disappears into the dunes. It is a stunning victory, but it is also the last easy mission, because the next theater of war won't be an empty desert. It will be occupied by France, where every villager could be an informant, and where Hitler's execution order is already being distributed to Gestapo headquarters. This raid exemplifies why the SAS bedevils the Axis. They achieve strategic results with 60 men, results that would normally require hundreds of bombers and thousands of personnel. Hitler is forced to divert entire frontline units to reinforce rear area garrisons, weakening his offensive capabilities. But as the Desert War winds down in 1943, the SAS is withdrawn to England to prepare for the invasion of Normandy. They are assigned a new mission, Operation Bulb-Basket, dropping deep into occupied France to wreak havoc 200 miles behind the invasion beaches. Their primary objective is to disrupt railway lines linking southwest France to Paris, delaying German panzer reinforcements, particularly the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, from reaching the Normandy front. The psychological atmosphere in France is far more tense than in the desert. The SAS operates from a hidden camp in the Verrières forest, working alongside local Maquis, resistance fighters. They use phantom signalers to maintain long-range communication with Britain, but the Gestapo is running a fiendishly effective counterintelligence operation, using captured radio sets to lure Allied parachutists directly into their hands. The SAS troopers know that capture no longer means a prisoner of war camp. It means execution. Hitler's commando befehl ensures that anyone caught will be handed to the SD for immediate execution. In late June 1944, 2 SAS non-commissioned officers, Sergeant Eccles and Corporal Bateman, are captured during a sabotage mission. Standard protocol dictates that the SAS move their camp immediately, but finding adequate water proves difficult in the summer heat, and the decision is made to return temporarily to the Verrières camp on July 2nd. What they don't know is that the Gestapo has been methodically interrogating their captured comrades, extracting the location of the hidden base. At dawn, on July 3rd, 1944, the SAS troopers at Verrières wake not to the sound of birds, but to the silence of a camp that has been perfectly surrounded during the night. The German attack is a textbook execution. Machine weapon fire rips through the trees from 3 sides simultaneously. The SAS attempts a desperate breakout, but the Germans have positioned MG-42s at every choke point. The sound is deafening, a chainsaw of bullets shredding bark and bone. One SAS lieutenant makes it 10 feet before rounds punch through his chest. 7 Maquis fighters fall beside him, their bodies crumpling into the undergrowth. The survivors raise their hands. They know what comes next. By the end, 31 SAS men are in German custody, including Lieutenant Lincoln Bundy, an American pilot who had been shot down and was being sheltered by the unit. According to Hitler's decree, there is to be no pardon, regardless of their uniforms or pleas for mercy. The prisoners are transported to Gestapo headquarters at Avenue Foch in Paris. Some are beaten with rifle butts. Others are deprived of sleep and water. The sensory overload is calculated horror, the smell of blood and sweat in cramped cells, the sound of screams echoing through stone corridors. Drop a comment below and let us know which World War II unit or battle you want us to cover next. There are so many incredible stories of courage and strategy that deserve to be told, and we want to hear what you're most curious about. On July 7th, 1944, the SAS prisoners were loaded into lorries and driven to the forest of Saint-Sauvant. The air is thick and humid, heavy with the smell of freshly dug earth. 3 mass graves have been prepared in advance, revealing the cold premeditation behind the executions. The SAS men know what is coming. Some plead for Lieutenant Bundy's life, arguing that he is not even part of their unit and should be treated as a regular POW. The German officers remain silent. Hitler's order is explicit. No pardon under any circumstances. The men are lined up in groups and eliminated. Some are executed while still recovering from wounds sustained during the Verrières ambush. After the war, investigators discover that certain SAS prisoners were terminated in a military hospital via lethal injection, a violation so grotesque it shocks even hardened war crimes prosecutors. The enactment of the commando befehl reflects the culture of violence that defines the SS and the Nazi regime. Hitler himself set the precedent in 1934 during the Night of the Long Knives, when he ordered the elimination of the SA leadership to consolidate his power. The survival of the nation, as Hitler defines it, justifies any atrocity. The SAS, in Hitler's twisted logic, represents a fundamental disruption to honorable Prussian land warfare, and they must be purged. What the Führer fails to realize is that every execution only strengthens the legend. Survivors of Operation Bullbasket do not retreat. They provide coordinates for a devastating napalm attack on the German barracks at Bonneuil-Matour, eliminating many of the troops involved in the Saint-Sauvant massacre. They construct a grass airstrip called Bonbon, using a Harrow towed behind a jeep to flatten the field, allowing RAF Hudson aircraft to land and evacuate remaining aircrews and signalers. Meanwhile, Hitler's physical and mental state is collapsing. In his bunker at the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia, he takes up to 60 pills a day, including strychnine and methamphetamine, to manage constant stomach cramps, tremors, and exhaustion. His hands shake so violently he can no longer shave himself. He suffers from medication-induced hallucinations and dizzy spells. This physical decay mirrors the collapse of Fortress Europe, as SAS and Special Operations executive teams continue to unleash chaos across occupied territories. The Phantom Major's legacy refuses to fade. After the war, the cost of SAS operations became clear. Hundreds of casualties resulted from missions that many higher commanders dismissed as private armies and stunts. But the strategic return is undeniable. The SAS established the blueprint for the modern Special Forces soldier: intelligent, self-reliant, motivated by purpose rather than ideology. Major Eric Bill Barkworth, an Oxford graduate fluent in 7 languages, leads a secret unit of war crimes investigators after the German surrender. They comb through Gestapo archives, interview witnesses, and locate execution sites in the Vosges Mountains and the forest of Saint-Sauvant. Barkworth hunts them down. He drags perpetrators into courtrooms. General Anton Dostler stands before a firing squad in 1945, convicted of executing 15 American commandos. At Nuremberg, Field Marshal Keitel and General Jodl are sentenced to hang. When the trapdoor opens in October 1946, Hitler's commando order ends with them. The message is carved into international law. Superior orders are no defense for war crimes. Admiral Erich Raeder receives a life sentence for the execution of Royal Marine commandos. The SAS was disbanded in October 1945, but post-war insurgencies, particularly the communist uprising in Malaya, ensured its rapid revival. The unit became the gold standard for counter-terrorism and special operations, achieving international fame in 1980 during the Iranian embassy siege in London, where SAS operator rescued 25 hostages in a daring televised raid. This modern effectiveness is the direct descendant of Sterling and Lewis's relative superiority theory. Today, elite military units like the SAS and the US Navy SEALs are symbols of aggressive, decisive action in an age of bureaucratic stagnation. Hitler tried to eliminate the SAS with execution orders. Instead, he made them immortal. The fear that haunted his final days in the bunker, the fear of the unseen enemy who strikes and vanishes, still defines warfare today, and it always will. So that's how 4 men haunted the most powerful dictator in Europe. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you catch every episode. What other World War II operations should we investigate? Code breakers at Bletchley Park? The Doolittle raid? Let us know in the comments. And if you know someone who loves military history, share this video with them. Thanks for watching,